We shall learn about properties of HTML elements in this lab. These properties are known as attributes and are primarily used to control the appearance or the action of an element or to access it uniquely within an HTML document. So let's start going with some examples. Let us declare an identity attribute known as an ID attribute of the heading and paragraph elements given in this code. So let's define an ID called active h1 for the heading and an ID of active para for the paragraph. So once again, save the file. Let's hit preview. So on the face of it, there's nothing special that seems to have happened here. But as we hover the mouse over the heading, the first thing you notice is that the mouse pointer has changed to the hand. Next, let's click on this. Wow, what happened? The paragraph disappeared. Let's click again. Well, it reappeared. So how did that happen? Well, by virtue of defining the IDs as we did. Now note that in the head section of this HTML document, we have included an external CSS and a JavaScript. Let's just take a look at the JavaScript file. So without going into what we've done here, see how the IDs that we just defined have been used in this JavaScript program. Essentially what we've done is written a small program that makes the web page behave as we just saw, right? So now let's move on and learn a little bit more about attributes. What we're going to do now is define an attribute known as class. Okay, so let's define an attribute class, assign it a value of faded. Okay, let's just do it for the heading element. Let's save this, hit preview, and what you see is that the heading content is sort of grayed out, right? Now how did that happen? Well, let's look at the CSS file. So as you can see is that we have defined some properties of the faded class in the CSS file. So essentially, by virtue of assigning this class to the heading element, you are attributing the format that is defined in this class in the CSS file, right? So right now don't worry about what opacity means, but just assume for now that it's sort of some sort of a format definition that alters the appearance, right? And we have assigned this class to the header element, and thereby the font or the text appears grayed out, right? So just play around with this. As you can see, there is another class called dark that is also defined. See what happens when you assign that class to the header or the paragraph or both, right? So now let's move on to the next step. Here we will learn about the title attribute. A title is something that is quite commonly used. So let's just assign a title attribute to the header. Let's call it my header, right? Let's save this. Okay, let's hit preview, right? So all the previous effects still persist. If you click on the header, the paragraph disappears. Click it again, the paragraph reappears, so on and so forth. The header text is grayed out. But now if you hover over the header with your mouse, you see this small yellow box popping up with my header written in it. And that's happened because we've assigned a title class. Cool. The next thing we're going to look at is the style attribute, right? So let's assign a style attribute, give it a value of text transform uppercase, right? Cool. So let's save this, hit preview. Okay, and what do you see? That the text content given in the header element now appears in block letters. And why has that happened? Because you specified a particular style attribute. Right? So in this case, the ID attribute in the header element allows us to introduce certain cool actions on the page. For instance, if you click on the header, the paragraph disappears and so on, right? The class attribute and the style attribute alter the appearance of the header element, while the title attribute shows you more information when you hover around it, right? So here are some of the things we've done by using the attribute of the header element. So just play around with whatever you've learned so far, assign some of these attributes to the paragraph element as well, and see what happens.